We don't have any other country except this country. So we must all work together, men and women, young and old, to make sure that this country survives, the unity of this country is maintained, and make sure we identify ourselves as Nigerians all the time.
I bumped into what the President, Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, that's PFN, what he said concerning what is happening in Nigeria and what is happening especially as it regards between the Christian and the Muslim. That content was actually done by Okocha Happy Marcel in his channel. And subsequently, he went to Channels Television and then he said a lot of things. But just before we continue, I will need you to hit the subscription button and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to get our updates as they drop. Now, back to the gist. Part of the things he said, I will just list out the points he mentioned during the interview. One of the things he said Nigeria is at the verge of being Islamized. That's not my first time of hearing it. I've heard it countless times. I've heard people talk about it. I've even heard Nnamdi Kanu say about it. But sometimes, people, we don't tend to believe some of these things. We want to have a verified story that we can put out there. Then another thing he said is that the terrorists killing people are doing so because of religion. It is not really about any other thing you can maybe think or imagine. It is done because of religion. Another thing is that he demanded that Nigeria must be removed from Islamic countries' registration. Yes, he said quite a lot of things, but the one that catches my fancy is that Nigeria being removed from Islamic countries' registration. And I begin to ask, how was Nigeria registered as an Islamic country? And for it to be, removed, it means that it was actually registered in the first place as an Islamic country. In order to really understand this very well, I had to go back to the Constitution. Nigeria is not officially an Islamic state. Section 10 of the 1999 Constitution is equivocal. The government of the federation or of a state shall not adopt any religion as state religion. Section 32 also guarantees every Nigerian freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So technically and constitutionally, Nigeria has not been declared an Islamic country. But that does not completely settle the debate. The more uncomfortable question is whether Nigeria could be gradually moving towards a political and institutional environment in which Islamic influence becomes disproportionately powerful, while the country continues to retain the formal label of a secular state. The possibility is what makes the debate about Islamization so persistent. The OIC controversy was more than a rumor. The roots of the present debate go back in 1986. Under the military government of General Ibrahim Babangida, Nigeria moved from its previous observer relationship with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, then known as the Organization of the Islamic Conference, to full membership. Academic research describes the decision as one of the most controversial foreign policy issues in Nigeria's history. The controversy was particularly intense because Nigeria was a religiously divided society and its constitutional framework was secular. What makes the episode particularly significant is that the decision was not simply a case of Nigeria attending an international conference. On January 9, 1986, Nigeria formally applied for full OIC membership, that's Organization of the Islamic Conference, OIC membership, at a meeting in Fez, Morocco, and was admitted after existing member states sponsored the application. The decision immediately generated opposition. Christian organizations argued that membership of an organization fundamentally associated with Muslim majority states compromised Nigeria's secular identity. Contemporary reports also described the controversy as deepening distrust between Nigeria's predominantly Muslim north and the predominantly Christian south. Most importantly, the controversy did not originate from nowhere. Nigeria had already experienced political debate over the place of Sharia and Islamic influence in the Nigerian state. Historical accounts record that some Islamic movements had openly advocated Islamization, while successive governments struggled with the question of how religion should relate to the Nigerian state. But some people may be asking why the OIC membership still matters today. Supporters of the 1986 decision argued that OIC membership was about diplomacy, economic cooperation, and Nigeria's relationship with the Muslim world, not about transforming Nigeria into an Islamic state. That argument has some merit. Membership of an international organization does not automatically rewrite Nigeria's constitution. But there is another important fact that cannot be ignored. Nigeria remains listed by the OIC as a member state today, with membership dating from 1986. That does not prove Islamization, but it does demonstrate that the controversial decision taken in 1986 was not merely a temporary political rumor. It created a formal international relationship that has endured for decades. And this is where the historical argument becomes important. The fear expressed by critics in 1986 was not simply that Nigeria would wake up the next morning and become an Islamic republic. Their concerns was that religious boundaries between the Nigerian state and organized Islam could gradually become less distinct. For decades later, that question has not disappeared. Sharia has already expanded beyond personal matters. Perhaps the strongest evidence used by those who fear gradual Islamization is the expansion of Sharia in parts of northern Nigeria. Nigeria's constitution recognizes Sharia's court of appeal. However, since 1999, 12 northern states have gone considerably further by operating Sharian-based legal system alongside the conventional Nigerian legal system. Those states are Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Niger, Sokoto, Yobe, and Zamfara states. The Sharia system in these states extend beyond status matters into aspects of civil and criminal justice. This is a crucial point. Nigeria remains constitutional secular, yet within the same federation, there are states where Islamic law forms an important part of the legal system. Supporters of Sharia argue that its application is constitutionally permitted and is primarily directed at Muslims. Critics, however, ask if Islamic law can expand from personal matters into criminal justice in part of a supposedly secular federation. Where does that expansion ultimately stop? That question deserves an honest answer. The Muslim presidency has broken an old political convention. The 2023 presidential election introduced another major development into Nigeria's religious politics. I said it in my previous content on this channel. You can go and check it up. President Bola Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima are both Muslims. Again, this is not unconstitutional. The Nigerian constitution does not require Christian-Muslim balance on a presidential ticket, but Nigerian politics has historically treated religious balancing as an important mechanism for managing the country's deep religious divisions. The decision to run a Muslim ticket therefore represents a significant departure from that political tradition. And the issue remains relevant ahead of 2027. Reuters reports on August 13, 2026 that religious representation remains under scrutiny as Nigeria approaches the 2027 presidential election, with the ruling political establishment continuing with a Muslim ticket. The question, therefore, is not whether having two Muslim leaders is legal. It is whether the gradual abandonment of religious balancing could contribute to a political environment in which one religious identity becomes increasingly dominant at the highest level of government. That is a political question, not a constitutional accusation. The blasphemy question raises another red flag. Another development concerns blasphemy and religious insult laws. The European Union Agency for Asylum reports that the expansion of Sharia-based criminal justice in northern states has contributed to continuing tension between constitutional rights and religious legal principles, particularly in cases involving alleged blasphemy. This raises an important issue for a secular democracy. Should religious offense become a criminal matter? If citizens can face state punishment because their words are considered offensive to a religion, critics can reasonably argue that religious principles are acquiring increasingly influence over criminal law. Again, that is not proof that Nigeria has become an Islamic state. But it is one of the developments that strengthens the argument that the boundary between religion and government deserves much closer scrutiny. The argument is not about Nigerian Muslims. There is an important distinction that must not be lost. Islamization is not the same thing as Islam. Nigeria has millions of peaceful Muslims who are committed to democracy, constitutional government, and peaceful coexistence with Christians and followers of traditional religions. The concerns should be, therefore, not to be directed against Muslims as a group. The real question is whether any religious ideology, Islamic or Christian, is gaining enough political power to influence the state at the expense of constitutional neutrality. If the same thing were happening through Christian religious law, it should be subjected to the same scrutiny. The security dimension makes the debate even more sensitive. Nigeria has also spent years confronting Boko Haram, ISWAP, and other extremist organizations whose ideologies include forms of Islamist governance. It would be intellectually dishonest to equate these extremist organizations with ordinary Nigerian Muslims. But it would be equally dangerous to pretend that extremist ideological movements have no relevance to the country's debate about religion and government. The existence of organizations seeking religiously defined political authority demonstrates why Nigerians should be particularly careful about the relationship between religion, politics, and state power. A secular state must be capable of protecting Muslims from persecution without allowing extremism interpretation of Islam to dictate government policy. The same principle applies to Christianity. So, is Nigeria about becoming an Islamic state? There is currently no constitutional evidence that Nigeria is about to formally declare Islam its state religion. Section 10 remains in force. Nigeria's constitutional system remains formally secular, and the country's political institutions continue to contain substantial Christian, Muslim, and other representation. Therefore, saying Nigeria has already become an Islamic state would be inaccurate. But saying there are no developments capable of creating concerns about country's religious direction would also be oversimplification. There is a documented history of controversy over OIC membership. Nigeria remains an OIC member. 12 northern states operate Sharia-based legal system. Religious considerations continue to play a major role in electoral politics. Nigeria has experienced a Muslim presidential ticket. Questions surrounding blasphemy laws continue to generate controversy, and extremist groups continue to exploit religious identity. These developments do not constitute proof of a secret plan to Islamize Nigeria, but they provide legitimate grounds to ask whether Nigeria's secular character is being gradually weakened in practice, even while it remains protected in the Constitution. Perhaps the most important lesson from history is that countries do not necessarily change their political identity through one dramatic constitutional declaration. Institutional change can happen gradually. It can occur through political appointments, through electoral calculations, through legal reforms, through the normalization of religious influence in government, through the expansion of religious institutions, and through citizens becoming accustomed to political power being associated increasingly with one religious identity. That is why Nigerians should not wait until someone formally announces an Islamic Republic of Nigeria before asking questions. The Constitution should be defended before it is violated, not after. Nigeria's secular character should therefore mean more than words written in Section 10. It should mean that Muslims, Christians, and traditional worshippers have equal citizenship, that government does not privilege one religion over another, that criminal law is not dictated by religious doctrine, and that political power does not become permanently identified with one faith. Nigeria may not be Islamic State today, but the warning from history is clear. A secular constitution is only as strong as the institutions and citizens willing to defend it. The real question facing Nigeria is therefore not simple. Has Nigeria been Islamized? It is. Are we allowing religious influence to become so deeply embedded in politics, law, and governance that the constitutional promise of a secular Nigerian state could eventually become only a piece of paper? That is the question Nigerians should be debating before 2027. Let me have your take. Drop them on the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Do well to turn on the notification bell so you will be the first to get our updates as they drop. Till next time, stay informed and stay connected.